The purpose of the Global CFO Council is to provide an educational and networking forum for senior financial executives in order to share best practices, discuss current financial issues, and to learn about current topics related to the performance of their jobs.
Dr. Troy Hall is an author, speaker, executive coach, and strategist. I think your title is Chief Strategery Officer at the South Carolina Federal Credit Union, a several billion-dollar financial institution headquartered in South Carolina. Is that correct, sir?
It is correct, and we serve in 5 markets in South Carolina.
Long career in senior leadership positions at other financial institutions. I think you got your MBA from Charleston Southern University and your PhD in global leadership and entrepreneurship from Regent University. Is that true, sir?
You are reading correct information.
Major community volunteer at the Low Country Orphan Relief. Is that true?
Again, true.
And an executive coach. I know that one's true because you're my executive coach. If you're wondering how I know Dr. Troy Hall and I've read his book, it's because he's no stranger to me. I sought him out and feel lucky to have you here, sir. If anybody's wondering how I keep it together and how I am the amazing person that I am, it's partly due to Dr. Troy Hall. And then I think you're a family man, and if this is true, I might have this right, is at one point, something interesting that I know about you is there were like 4 generations of Halls in your house at the same time.
Yes, for 5 years, 4 generations all lived together under the same roof.
Wow, God bless you. And you're still sane and in here to speak with us today. I'm looking forward to it. Troy, I'm going to mute myself and I pass the mic to you, sir.
Well, great. Thanks, Robert, and appreciate that. Welcome to all of you global CFOs. As Robert mentioned in the introduction, I had 4 generations all living under the same roof for about 5 years. And so that was what I call family place cohesion. But today we're going to talk about something else that's important to us, and that's the workplace. And we're going to talk about cohesion in the workplace. And something I like to say is exactly what the doctor ordered. So let's take a look at what we see as workforce expectations. So I think this will help us get our mind around what we're dealing with. And by the way, even though I mentioned before 4 generations living together, this information is not generational specific and is not cultural specific. These expectations are taken from global perspectives and apply in the United States as well as in many countries around the world. In taking a look at these expectations, the first I start with is entrepreneurial spirit. And these are the individuals that you are bringing into the workforce today. And some of us who have been here for a while, we also subscribe to this same expectation. We want to be, we want our voices to be heard. We want to be able to have autonomy in our jobs and our expectations of what we're supposed to do. We want to know our roles and responsibilities. In many cases, organizations are also focusing individuals to think like the CEO and to really make sure that they are adopting a concept that says, I'm going to be more socially, I'm going to be more acceptable of what I do. So in focusing on the entrepreneurial spirit, the second expectation that we have in the workforce is the collaborative mindset. These are where individuals want to work together. They want to have a sense of belonging, obviously, so that they can be a part of it. They don't just want to fit in, they want to collaborate. They want their voices to be heard. They want to have a say in what's done. And it's not so much that these individuals are looking for a complete democracy. They just want to make sure that what they're going to be asked to do makes sense. And it's going to filter. And when you see this later on with this information, you'll see how it all comes together. Don't be surprised by the word social media, to think that the expectations is that everyone expects to be connected at work socially. That's just the word cloud that to really reinforce the fact that we are a type of individuals. As human beings, we want to be socially connected. We will seek out a variety of ways of doing it. Of course, today in technology, it is important that we can find ways to connect with individuals socially. And we've been challenged over the past year because our traditional face-to-face interactions have been interrupted. And so now we have looked to a virtual perspective to become socially connected. You'll find applications such as Clubhouse, which is available on the iPhone platform, allows thought leaders to come together and to collaborate in an environment where, again, not only am I sharing my viewpoint, but I'm also staying socially connected with others. The last is purpose and meaning. And again, this drives everything that we do. Many of us have jobs because we need to. Not few of us can actually say, look, I'm just doing this for fun. So when we do it, even though we need it for money, we want to make sure that what we're doing has purpose and meaning. And if it doesn't, then it could be the reason that we might look somewhere else. So one of the ways to drive cohesion within your workplace is to begin with your entrepreneurial spirit, collaboration, social connectivity, and having purpose and meaning, and ensure that you have those types of elements in your workplace. And for many of you, understanding this from your perspective of being the CFO, you're very numbers driven. So some of this sounds a little bit like it's conceptual in nature, and it's like, well, here's the soft stuff again. Where does the hard numbers come in? So let's just take a look at a few pieces of data for you. So the first one is, I'm going to ask you now to give me thumbs up and thumbs down. So I'm going to use the number 50. So if you believe that the number of employees who are actively seeking growth, development, and advancement is greater than 50, thumbs up. If you think it's lower than 50, thumbs down. And therefore, you know the answer is not 50. Okay, so I'm getting yes, there you go. Good. So what I want to share with you is that the percentage is 63%. So 63% of your employees actively in your organization, by the way, this is global, 63% of them are seeking growth, development, and advancement. So you now understand that you have a large propensity of individuals in your organization wanting something different. So now the opportunity for you is, let's take a look at the cost of those 63% of people if they choose to leave your organization. Tell me now, again, on the number 50, up or down, what is the percent of cost for a salary to replace that individual's organizational intelligence? This is what they know about the company that they take with them. So is the number greater or lower than 50%? Got some thumbs up again. I see a thumbs down or two. Good. Really appreciate all of you working in that. So let's just take a look at what our answer is. So you answered correctly on the first answer, which we looked at, which said that there were 63% of the individuals. And now the cost to replace talent is 25%. That's in addition to the cost of acquisition and onboarding. So it is real important for you to take a look at what you are dealing with in the cost. So you take a $60,000 salary, you take 25% of that's 15,000. Look, even the marketing guy can get it. So I didn't need my calculator for that. That is at minimum what the individual is taking from the nuances that they know about the organization that you would expect to typically have been shared with others and contribute to the everyday productivity of what's happening. So now let's take a look at, and again, I apologize, but I have these things that keep showing up on the screen, Robert, so I apologize for throwing me off a little bit on them. I wasn't expecting those requests to come in to annotate the screens and so forth. So if you're able to control that on your end, Robert, I'd appreciate it. So now again, let me just recap a little bit. We've talked about these expectations that we have in the workplace. We also then said 63% of them are looking for some advancement or growth. By the way, it doesn't mean they have to go somewhere else. But if you're not putting it in place in your current organization, it's something that you definitely want to think about. Then it moves into the cost. That's the hard numbers, 25% of that cost. Then you're going to add on top of that the cost for acquiring someone, for actually then still doing some regular day-to-day training that needs to happen for them. You can sometimes expend the entire amount of money that you lost in salary to actually get a new person to fill in the seat again. But you won't solve the problem if you're not handling cohesion within the work group. So one of the things I like to make sure that folks understand is that engagement is out, cohesion is in. It's not engagement. So are you looking for people who are happy? Are you looking for people who are content? And by the way, let me just make sure you're really clear. Happy and contented people do not mean that they're engaged. They don't necessarily mean that they're performing well. They just means they're happy or they're content or they're satisfied. What you do want to look for are individuals who are culturally fit to your organization. That's where your cohesion will start to really take place. And by the way, the concept of cohesion is not, again, bound by cultural expectations. It is still an opportunity for all cultures to experience cohesion. Cohesion, not engagement. And there's some very specific things that we could talk about, such as the difference between correlational data and causal data that will create why cohesion is a better predictor of behavior. But let's just take a look at the cohesion culture for a second now and say, okay, we're going to subscribe to the fact that, yes, we want to bring cohesion into our culture. We want to make it a part of it. So in that, we're going to look at three primary elements, or what I call the strategic framework for cohesion. The first one is belonging. When individuals belong, they believe that they're a part of something special. It's a part of something that's greater than what they would have expected or could have done on their own. It's more than just fitting in. It's actually committing to the organization, doing something above and beyond. When you were looking for engaged employees, more than likely, you might have thought that you could observe that behavior and you could say, oh, I can tell that person's engaged by their actions. They show up to work on time, do what they need to do, and they don't bother me very much. But the reality is that you don't know that whether you have an engaged person or not. What you know is that you have someone who shows up on time, does their job, and doesn't bother me very much. So in the area of belonging is really important aspect, because as humans, we want to be a part of something. So Simon Sinek says that our need to belong is not rational, but it does exist across all people and all cultures. So when we're thinking about the area of belonging and the real value we get from it, what's helpful to know is that cohesion builds performance, and that performance builds engagement. So if you do want to look for engagement, you should be looking for cohesion first. Now there's the value aspect, and this value goes beyond just respecting individuals, treating them fairly and right, which we should be doing anyway. In a cohesion culture, the value is specifically does the person's work mean something to them? Can they relate their work to other people in the organization? Do they know what their individual job means to the whole, to the bigger picture? When that happens, the individual has value because they have self-worth in what they're doing. It's not just a meaningless task that they're doing. They're not droning through that. They're actually doing something that's really great, and they feel good about it. And Brene Brown says that living into our values means that we do not just profess our values, but we actually live them. So in your organization, when you look at your cultural values, and these are your core values to the organization, understand that your core values build your belief system, which then shows up in your attitudes and how you think about something, optimistically or not, or pessimistically, or whether you have a good attitude or a bad attitude about something. It all comes from your core values, from your beliefs, and then all three of them manifest themselves to become the behaviors. And so what we're looking at in a cohesive environment is the fact that we can enact these types of behaviors that bring people into alignment with the core values, and those individuals will live them. The third element is mutual commitment. But this is where most organizations fail the test of making sure that they connect. One of the reasons that they fail is because they just assume that because the individual has agreed to work there, that they're going to show up and do what they're supposed to do. And that's fine, and that certainly is a reasonable expectation. But because I told you that 63% of the individuals that you have that you're bringing into the organization are seeking growth, development, and advancement, the first aspect in mutual commitment is the organization gives to the employee first, and the employee then reciprocally returns that. They return that in their performance. They return that in the way they engage and interact with the consumers that they have. So first and foremost, we must, as organizational leaders, commit to the individual first and explain why their importance is to the organization. I also mentioned to you those 4 workplace expectations. Those expectations are in place in addition to those individuals looking for growth and development. And that's why you focus on the employee first and then what comes next. The really good news in all of this is that when we combine those three strategic elements of belonging, value, and mutual commitments, we get a cohesion culture. And when we do, then we share in each other's humanity, we share in each other's abilities to perform the desired or the expected outcomes of the group. Desmond Tutu says that my humanity is bound up in yours. We can only be human together. So we look at how we build diversity, equity, and inclusion through a cohesion culture. And I will tell you that cohesion is a better predictor of behavior. Cohesion equals performance equals engagement. Cohesion is a causal phenomenon. It is not correlational. It means that when you know that it is present, you get the performance and you get the engagement that you're looking for. Now, one of the things I'd like to do before we go to our first question and answer is, Robert, for you to unmute, and this is your chance now to play back with me.
Uh-oh.
Okay, here you go. So one of the things that comes up often is that people say, well, look, you talk about belonging, value, and mutual commitment. Does that mean that every organization has to be exactly the same? And my answer is no, and I'm going to show you by making a comparison with chocolate cake. So, Robert, have you had chocolate cake before?
Yes.
Have you had at least one piece of chocolate cake?
Definitely.
Okay. Have you had a piece of chocolate cake from different bakers?
Many.
Good. And I will not ask you if you had more than one piece at the same sitting. So having that said, would you be able to say that the chocolate cakes are exactly alike?
Never.
No, they're not. Thank you. So in comparison to chocolate cake, here's the deal. 3 primary ingredients are needed for a chocolate cake in addition to the cocoa. You need eggs, milk, and flour. Now, y'all can figure out whether you bake or not, there's a variety of eggs and milk sources and flour sources that you can use to be combined to make your chocolate cake. You still will create a chocolate cake that will have that chocolate flavor, but it will be unique to you based on the way you approached the eggs, the milk, and the flour. The same way you will approach belonging, value, and mutual commitment. The objective is to take that strategic framework, apply it over top of your organization, and then determine what things are you doing in each of these areas, where do you have gaps, and then how can you break that and move that forward so that you will really produce that environment where not only are people operating cohesively together, but also performing at a level. And there's some statistics about performing that I'm going to get to a little bit later. So now, Robert, this is our opportunity for our first break for questions and answers, part 1.
I got a bunch. I'm going to hit you rapid fire, okay?
Okay, go for it.
First was, and you covered it a little bit, but this is so important, I want you to cover it again, around correlation versus causation. People get that mixed up. So you could give us a little cover there?
Sure, will. Now, being a CFO, you look at data all the time, and I bet you look at information and have you evaluate it from correlational standpoints, which means there's a statistical relationship between the data, or there's no relationship between the data. That's one of the two things that will happen. Oftentimes, we try to make predictive behavioral outcomes out of 2 items that may be related together, but it doesn't necessarily mean that one causes the next. The best way for you to predict behavior is to find a causal event that predicts something, and then you know that you have it. So, Robert, I'm going to ask you this real quick. I'm going to say rainy days and umbrellas. Do you always open an umbrella on a rainy day?
Yeah, yes.
You always do. So you never go out into the rain without an umbrella?
Okay. I'm not always prepared, even though I'm a Boy Scout.
Okay, good. Do you ever go to the beach and open an umbrella?
I'm married to someone who requires it. So if
Okay, great. So here's the deal. I can tell you in data, there's a strong statistical probability that umbrellas will be opened on a rainy day, but rainy days do not cause umbrellas to be open. You open them sometimes to test them. You can open them on the beach, but you cannot even open them at all. But when it comes to correlation, when it comes to cohesion and causal, cohesion causes performance, and that happens in all stages of the group's life cycle when it's working on its common goal.
the next question is a little bit of a pull the string on that. It's around cohesion. At one of your slides talked about that it is a predictor, or there's causal between that and better performance. Can you speak to the data specific on On that, please.
Yeah, sure. So because we know that when we study cohesion and when those elements that I mentioned to you, belonging, value, and mutual commitment, that's from the research that is out there, my research and others, it shows that that is a causal piece. And so causal, when you can determine that something causes another, it's a better predictor of behavior than just simply having a relationship. Because you can have, if you've ever read Freakonomics, you know that there are crazy correlational data that can happen between two items, but they don't necessarily predict one or the other. And so that's why you want to look for something, and that's truer to you for an organization for performance. If you really said, look, I'm concerned about these soft things, these soft skills that we put in place in my organization. I'm a CFO, I want to see hard numbers, I want to see data, then you can look at performance. And so one of the numbers I'm going to give you later, but I'll share with you now, is that when you measure the increase that you have, when you have cohesion in place and you measure the increase in performance of an organization, up to 50% of that increase is attributed to productivity and creativity is based on having cohesion in place. The absence of cohesion, you have less performance than you do. Can you still have performance without cohesion? Absolutely. But if you want optimum performance, then you want cohesion.
Troy, we got a question in here on the cohesion slide where you defined it as belonging, value, commitment. Question around the company's trying to work on that, and they're trying to improve cohesion. Do you do all three at the same time? Is there a particular order? What are your recommendations if somebody's working on this and they want to improve belonging, value, commitment? Is it all at one time in some kind of order? What are your thoughts?
Well, for me, I like to equate it to eating food. So I'm not the type of person that has to eat all of the vegetables before I can eat the meat and then eat the potatoes. I tend to eat them together to create a more flavorful experience for me in eating. Similarly, in a culture, it's not a one-dimensional culture. It's a dynamic, interactive. So you'd be working on all of them. In many cases, some of them will actually build to each other depending upon the activity you do. So for instance, when you start with your core values of the organization and you align people to it, then they give them the parameters for belonging. So if your acquisition team is not clearly hiring people based on the core values of the organization in addition to skill, then you have a breakdown that you're going to occur. So that's a way in which you can take the values and you actually build belonging because you're aligning people. And also in those values, you're sharing what is my shared commitment that I need to have. And also I'm saying, oh, if I want to be valued in the organization, oh, it's core values. So that's just one example. And I can speak to anybody who wants to know more information. I can tell you how these others will all relate, but that's at least one to show you how how one thing can actually build all three.
This one's on the workforce expectation slide. Pretty wide ranges of expectations from employees in the workforce. Any tips or best practices on offering versus forcing those kind of things?
Well, in all cases, an organization's primary goal is to set expectations, boundaries, and standards and protocols. And individuals should know what the rules are for engagement within an organization. Where the disconnect comes is not so much that the individual employee doesn't understand, it's that those expectations or those boundaries don't meet their expectations. So again, the goal is to try to create as much alignment as you possibly can with all of them. And there's opportunities through survey questions and interactions with coaching that also happens between the individual supervisors and folks who are coming into the organization, or even those who've been there for a while. And I'm going to offer you a suggestion of something that you can do for individuals, because I don't want you to think that this cohesion is all about the new people who come in. It's still also very good for the individuals who have been committed and continue to want to work in your organization.
Troy, last question for this section, and then I'll hold the questions till the end. Is a question on inclusion. You had that at the bottom of a couple of slides, and it was any tips or best practices for inclusion, specifically decision making at the CFO level? How could we model that behavior of inclusion and decision making? What are your thoughts?
Well, the thing about it is when you think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, you're thinking of the emotional connections that people have. So it's kind of hard if you're looking at raw data and you're trying to make a decision, do I do a project or not do it? And I'm basing it on whether it has a net value of $1 or more. Certainly it's very economic. Decisions are based on two factors, economic and emotional. And a good decision has a balance between understanding the emotional impact of that decision as well as the financial impact of that decision. And if you think about it, why it's important that you look at it that way is I think about buying a car. I will buy a car sometimes that really appeals to my emotional value, but it's not economically sound for me to do it. It wasn't the best choice I made, but I made that decision because my emotions overran it. Our jobs and your jobs as a CFO is to create a better balance between the numbers and the emotional impact. I suggest that you don't leave the emotions out, but that what you do is you include um, obviously different sources of your numbers and to make sure that your numbers are valid. So again, I'm also assuming that any of the numbers you're using to make an economic decision, you've validated those numbers. If not, then there's an opportunity to contribute. Because I do think that it makes a difference in business that sometimes doing the right thing is not always what is the most profitable or the most economic. It's what is the best for everyone involved when you take into multiple factors.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. I'm going to mute myself and hold the questions to the end.
All right, let's go on to the next piece here. So we're going to try to put it all together, and I'm going to give you some pieces of information that I think would be helpful to you. So we're going to look at 6 things that make sense for leaders to do in the organization. Now, one of the things that's also very prevalent is what we're looking at is called reboarding. So as you can imagine throughout this pandemic, we've had individuals who have gone from being in a remote environment or being face-to-face or being in their offices, and they've now gone to this remote. Prior to the pandemic, 6% of the US population, so for those of you globally, please, this is only for US data right now. So prior to the pandemic, 6% of the US population of workers were considered to be remote workers or virtual. When the pandemic hit, 62% individuals moved immediately, almost overnight, to working in that kind of an environment. What we think is going to happen that when this pandemic stabilizes, I'm not even using the word new normal because I think that's ridiculous to say it because nothing is going to be the same as it was before. So once it stabilizes, we were going to expect up to 25% or more of those jobs are now going to continue to be, they're going to continue to be considered remote or virtual. So what you're going to have now in your environment is you're going to have this situation that is virtual, in person, and hybrid. So these things that you're going to talk about will actually make sense to you in overall of thinking of those 3 particular groups. So the first thing that I want to mention to you is that it's real important that you involve the 6 senses in the experiences. So for instance, when you're having a Zoom call, much like the ones we're doing today, it was good to have some interaction. So why did I involve some interaction for you? Because you want to have yourself engaged. It's not only just your visual sight and your sound, but there's a tactile experience. Those 3 are the primary tactile items that you put in place to create the learning. So keep that in mind. If you can add the other senses to it, then it will make sense. But you'll also notice too that I said 6 senses. So you're saying, well, gee, I wonder how that works. So again, visually, we're looking at a PowerPoint presentation. We're looking at each other. So we have some visual. We are listening to what's happening as you're hearing me talk about this. Touching, you touched the keyboard, you did something. So you got those 3 elements in there. The other 2 that are really hard are your taste and, of course, your smell. But there are some tips and some things that I'll share with you later that can allow those experiences to happen, whether you're in person or whether it's a virtual or a hybrid experience. The last sense that I want you to think about is space. This is something that's overlooked, but in our brains, how we relate to space helps communicate our experiences and how we relate to our world around us. So although I use the moon as a way to help me think about space, it really is the connections between 3-dimensional objects. What's happening with us is that we're connecting to this 1-dimensional picture that's on the screen. and we're not getting the full opportunity of it, of having these experiences that are three-dimensional. And for a long-term impact, that can be a problem, which is why you want to ensure that even though you might have virtual teams, you do create some sort of opportunity to connect so that you get that three-dimensional impact and experience happening. So that's why I talk about the six senses. So I wasn't making reference to the Bruce Willis movie. I was actually talking about our traditional five senses plus the way our brain thinks about space. The second thing is that we need to limit impersonal communication. We find that sometimes in our virtual world that it's much easier for us to send text messages and emails to communicate what we're doing. But we're people. We need to see each other. We need to interact. It's our sense of belonging. These communication tools are important for us to have. But what we need to do is we need to think about morning huddles, debriefs, and online chats. I'll give you one quick example of something that one of my clients put in place. They have a standing meeting that starts at 9 o'clock. They actually open the session 15 minutes ahead of time, and it is for nothing but conversation. There's nothing on the screen, just the people popping in. There's interactions. One person is the greeter. The one person is responsible for making sure that individuals talk to each other and begin to connect. Why that's important is because what you may have experienced in this virtual world, and certainly through the Zoom, is that you don't get enough opportunity to talk and interact. And this is the freedom to be able to do that. Debriefs are what you do at the end of the day. Research from Harvard indicates that how a person feels about the work that they've done at the end of the day is how they will start the work the next day. That's important to you because you want to leave people feeling cohesively connected, because we already have told you that cohesion is performance, is engagement. And of course, having online chats and making sure that you are checking into people, not just about work, but also who they are as people. The third is to conduct stay interviews. Now, I've only focused on two questions here. I've highlighted two. You have the slides, or you'll get the slides so you can actually do more with that. But what will occur with a stay interview, that's also for those employees who've been around for a while. I would not use this on new employees. These are people who have been in your organization for a year or more. Now, you don't call it a stay interview. That's what you know it's called. What it is a coaching session. It's a one-on-one. It's a meeting. It's an opportunity to gain some feedback. And so these questions have been developed with a number of the clients that I've worked with, and we've come up with 7 questions that we believe will be the very best in getting feedback is how to retain people. And so we ask it in a fun way. What about your current role makes you want to jump out of bed versus hitting the snooze button? What do you like about what you're doing? And you get this feedback, and this rich feedback will help you be able to determine where you might have gaps individually now in belonging, value, and mutual commitment. And if you think about it, these questions are going to, you can start to see through these 7 questions as you're reading the screen where belonging, value, and mutual commitment can be there. And the biggest one for mutual commitment is number 7, which says, what can I do to help you? So that is our question as leaders. What can I do to help you? And it's to get the most out of here and what you do. So stay interviews are important. The fourth element is to focus on team building and team bonding. And I don't have enough time to give you a lot of information on this, but what I will share with you is that the bricks built is the building aspect, and it's the skills. Team bonding is the mortar, and it is built on feelings. So it's important for you to understand the difference between team bonding and team building. So again, as you are contributing dollars from your budget for activities, now you have an opportunity to determine, is that activity team building where you're building skills, or is it team bonding? To give you an example, I have one of my strategic colleagues. His name is Benjamin Toy. He is world renowned for his team building and team bonding. He has co-partnered with me on a project which we call Cohesion Culture Camp, where we've brought hands-on activities into this online camp program. And he very specifically teaches individuals the difference between building and bonding activities. He took an event, a group on a kayaking event because that's what the leader wanted. And in that kayaking event, people were great. They had a good time. That leader said, oh my gosh, when we get back, people are going to be working together. It'll be awesome. They get back, and what happens in one day? They're already having fighting. There's mood swings, all kinds of disconnects, and he can't understand why this didn't change, because the focus of the problem within the organization were the skills of the individuals working together, not whether they could get along with each other. For the most part, we can get along with people, even those we don't like, especially if it's a fun activity. But when we have to work with people, those ugly things come out. So we want to build skills like communication, negotiation skills, conflict resolution, and be very specific. And there are activities that differ between the two. Infuse unexpected fun. One of my clients actually delivered popcorn to their employees during the pandemic, and everyone was scheduled to open the popcorn at the same time. They didn't have a large group meeting, they had individual group meetings that were happened at the same time, because it's a large organization and they couldn't have thousands of people on the Zoom at the same time. So they broke it up into smaller groups, they organized the time, they opened the popcorn, people had the popcorn, they had a little bit of fun. Now, the popcorn attributed to 5 of the senses, because I got my taste and my smell involved into my tactile experience of pulling the popcorn out and eating it, what I was seeing, what I was hearing, the sound of the crunch of the popcorn. So infuse unexpected fun into it. Everything cannot just be about work. The last is commit to growth and development. As I mentioned to you before, 63% of all the employees in the organization are thinking about their growth and development. It's top of mind for them. So do you have programs in place that allow for shadowing? Do you allow for internships where individuals, and I don't mean internships from, where you bring somebody from the outside in, are you offering internal internships? Think about it for succession planning. You understand that bench strength is very important for the stability of the organization. It's not just managing the profits, but it's also managing the intelligence within the organization as well. And ensuring that you've got good, strong bench strength, you have to do things that will allow that. Do you offer coaching and mentoring within your organization? Any of those things will help for the growth and development. The last thing you want is for people to be forced to have to look outside of your organization, because when they do, it drives up the cost. So I've been giving you a screen here that recaps the 6 items for you to be able to take a look at. These are 6 things that will make sense to do. Cohesion increases productivity and creativity by up to 50%. That's the statistic that I gave you in the first presentation. I wanted to remind you, here it is. Here's the real solid numbers. I've given you solid data that will help you understand why you want to focus on cohesion, why you want to support your HR teams when they bring these types of activities to you. And when they do bring you activities for diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's no longer just should be the concept, it should be producing something tangible from it. So you want to focus on that. And again, for any individual who wants to have more information on that, you can connect with me separately. Now, the last one is, this is the percentage of people who love their jobs and are going to be willing to stay. Again, using thumbs up and thumbs down on 50. Do you think the number is higher or lower than 50%? Thumbs up and thumbs down. I see thumbs up and I see thumbs downs. Here's the correct answer. 87% of people who love their jobs are willing to stay. So you're going to say, well, yeah, it's 13%. This is a large number to stabilize your workforce. And let's be real, the number one category on your balance sheet, the largest category on your balance sheet is people. When you have to balance a budget, when you have to decide budget cuts, you can't cut enough subscriptions to make it work. Sometimes it's going to have to do with the workforce. And so why not really focus on ways in which you get people to love their jobs and create that cohesion culture to do it? Again, these are not made up statistics. These are statistics that have been validated. I'll give you an example of how this worked. I serve as a consulting advisor for the College of Charleston and their international MBA program. So I help take these students on international trips. And I have surveyed each and every one of them through 3 excursions that we've had prior to the pandemic. And the number has come in anywhere between 80 and 90% of those MBA students who say, I would stay with the job if I love it, versus getting more money. You know where most of that 13% is? It's people who says, look, I will make a little bit of money first, then I'm going to find the job I love. and then I'll go from there. Part of my coaching advice to people is find the career you want, not the job you have. Robert, that takes us into the second round of questions.
All right, we got a bunch, so I'm going to hit you rapid fire. First
Okay.
is actually just a comment that I thought was funny, and I'm going to read it, is that inclusion in decision making is not dumping terrible projects on your subordinates. I thought that was pretty funny.
That's great.
Here's the first question, and it's mine, so I'm selfishly going to ask you. So I've got to do these what we call LCE engage. I'm the CFO of LCE, and we have to do these like catch-ups every couple of months at least with the employees. You know, you're not supposed to wait until the end of the year to give them a review. Makes sense, but I'm running out of stuff to talk about. So could you tell me some more about those stay interviews? Those I might steal those questions. Tell me a little bit more. Coach me up on that.
Sure. So for the stay interview, the goal that you want to find out is why do they want to stay at the organization? Why do they want to be retained? And see what their answers are, and then you can craft future conversations around them. You might find that the individual says, I would really like to stay here if you delegated more to me. So in delegation, there's two options that happen. You either delegate something because it needs to get done. It might be, you know, hey, can you file this? Can you run this? Can you do that? It's just simple task delegation. Then there's another form of delegation that says, I want to train and develop you. And individuals want that. And so, again, you can use the stay interview to gain that information, and then you can use it in subsequent meetings. But the other tip I'm going to give you that you didn't ask for is this one. Sometimes when you're having these meetings, you should have others bring the agenda to the meeting. You can give that as a responsibility. That training and that development of that individual to bring forth what they want to talk about in that one-on-one session is a great way for you to do it. And they just need to tell you in advance so that you can be prepared. Not everybody is going to be able to talk extemporaneously on something, and you want to make sure that you have some preparation that you've done to be ready for it. So that's a great way that you can extend the conversations. And in these sessions, it should not just be about, well, what work have I done? I mean, look, anybody can have a meeting to say, hey, what's the progress on this project? But if we can dig deeper and say things like, what have you, after you figured out that the project is 50% completed and you're on track, I might ask, what have you learned about this project so far? What do you still need to learn about this project to go further? And those one-on-one meetings and those touch points, they really and truly don't need to take a lot of time. And I will tell you that I am a very big proponent of it being continuous performance engagement. And that means that, yes, you don't wait until the annual review before you surprise somebody with information. Think about it. Think about a number that you let be wrong on your balance sheet for 12 months before you finally corrected it. That's a big problem for you. The same thing happens in performance. If you aren't giving feedback and helping individuals be better and be moving toward where they need to be, you just created a bigger problem for yourself than if you had addressed it early on. And those are some of the things that I think can help you in those one-on-ones.
Troy, question from the chat box. Difference between team building versus team bonding?
So team building is skill set. Team bonding is your emotional connection, people relating. So I will tell you that in team building, you always have team bonding because we're working together, solving something. There's interpersonal relationships, unless of course the exercise is to be silent, and then there may not be much relating to it. And sometimes there are some silent activities, but for the most part, you're having some interaction, some engagement, some dynamics of people. So you're getting the bonding activity. But if you have a problem inside your office, inside your organization, and that problem is that people aren't getting along, you have to get to the root cause of why aren't they getting along. Is there some conflict? Is there some communication issue? What is the real issue, and then deal with it. And just understand that if all you do is get people together and serve pizza and have beer pong Friday or whatever might be the wonderful activity you do, your potluck dinners, those are great activities to happen. And do they create some sense of belonging? They do, but they don't address systemic problems that you have in the organization. And you need to make sure that you're using the right tool to correct the right problem.
Troy, how to manage relationships with difficult people while in leadership and working on cohesion, belonging, value, commitment?
Well, that's a tough one. And for that individual who asked, I may have to speak to you more specifically because it'll be very challenging to give a general answer. but here's how it works. Difficult people may be difficult because they've been allowed to be that way. So you have to find out, you ask yourself first, what have you been doing to contribute to them being a difficult person? Now, if the individual is a supervisor and they're difficult, man, that's a whole new game because they control what we call institutional power, and that creates a problem. But when the individual reports to you and they're difficult, then you have to ask, what have you done to contribute to that? Have you not addressed issues that should have been addressed? Have you not been more direct? What if the individual has some flaw in character where they show up late to a meeting and you joke about it? Well, one of the first rules is you don't joke about anything you want to correct or what you want to change. The other thing is to remember this: it's core values, build your beliefs, build your attitudes, and build your behaviors. If you want to change a person's behavior, you have to address the core value. So you have to you can't just ask them to have a better attitude because their attitude could be superficial. It could be synthetic, not authentic and genuine. So there's a little bit of general information around the question, but for me, what I do is I coach very specifically to people on what they can do to make changes when they have a difficult person they're working with. And yes, I can work with people who have difficult bosses and help make a difference in that. And I really have well-documented cases of making that happen both ways.
Troy, question in the chat box about the book Grit. So just your thoughts. Have you read it? A book on grit and passion and perseverance.
So yes, I have it's been a while since I've read the book, so I don't know that I'll be be able to quote specifics from it. But if I understood correctly, that particular book is around. I think one of the words you used in setting it up is about the passion, and the idea here is to find purpose, and then people's passion come with their purpose. So for me, the one thing that's important is that individuals understand what their role is, how do they purposely fit, and their passion will come forward. Their emotional piece will come forward out of their connection with what they're doing. It's not going to, like for instance, if a person has a passion about driving a race car and they like love driving a race car, you want them to have that level of passion in your organization, but you're not going to be driving race cars in your organization unless that's what you really do. But for most of you on this call, you're not driving race cars. You don't work in a company that does that. But if you work in financial services, then you have an opportunity of helping others. So you want to think about that. How do I help others? You want people who are smart about helping others and to solve whatever those individuals' problems are. If you're an engineering firm, you want individuals who have a desire to craft and create and to solve problems. And so therefore, that's their purpose, and their passion will be unleashed because they've made a connection. So again, focus on the purpose of the individual and what they're doing, and then allow opportunity for their passion to explode. When will their passion explode? When you go back to some of the items I talked to you about from your workforce expectations. You give people autonomy. Do they have authority? Can they make decisions? Do they have some freedom? Do they get to collaborate? Do they get to be connected to other people where they've got resources of colleagues and peers that they can call on to get information? And lastly, do they know what they're doing and how it connects to others in the organization?
I got a bunch of questions left. I'm gonna pull two more just for time. First question is virtual onboarding, how to handle culture onboarding and culture building when hiring new employees virtually.
So again, it's very much a challenge, and one of the things that I'm working on right now with Ben is a reboarding program, and to really look at the things that make a difference in how we reboard, bringing people who are virtual back into the organization, but to even think about how you onboard through your virtual experience. The first thing I say to folks in thinking about is, what did you do when they were in person? What were the things that you did? How can you make that work in a virtual experience? And if you remember the 6 things I told you, can you get the senses involved? Can you make sure that your information includes connections, belonging, value, mutual commitment? How are you doing that through the interaction? Did you allow people to connect, or is it just I'm going to sit there and tell you? I would suspect that if you had a physical onboarding experience and all you did was lecture at people all day long, the chances are you don't have people any better connected to your organization than if they sat in a Zoom meeting for an hour. But so you have to create these opportunities for people to start sharing what they're learning. And so in an onboarding experience, we didn't get to do enough of it here, but typically in a company, if you're doing this onboarding, you might have something on the screen and then you'll do this. You'll come up here and you will stop sharing. And what that will do, and we did that only once through the program because it was too complicated in an hour to keep doing it. But now we get to see each other. And one of the rules that you should have is that if you're here, you should be on the screen. If a person signed into this, they should be on the screen. They should not be away from the screen. They should not be away from their space. They shouldn't have the privilege of being able to just camera themselves off whenever they want. And those are part of the cultural expectations you set. Because when you're putting somebody into a real class and you're sitting in your company, do you let them snooze off? Do you let them choose to walk out and go to the bathroom? No, you don't expect any of that. So when you're doing it virtually, you apply the same standards, but you just make sure that you've set it up and that you know how to do it.
All right, Troy, this is a heavy question that we could have an hour-long discussion about, and you got 1 minute. All right.
I was going to say, I got 1 minute. Yeah.
And like 30 seconds is of me going to be reading the question. So here it is. How is cohesion achieved in working groups that have different core values? Shared core values in the workforce might have been a given 35 years ago. Today, I continue to read articles and see commentary on TV that significant societal groups do not agree on shared core values. Some societal groups believe in different things. So can you speak a little bit to that? Maybe some new thoughts on, do we share anything and how that connects with cohesive culture?
Okay. So again, I'll do this really quickly. So again, the values that the organization establishes are the ones that they have set. It's the expectations of the company. And what I say to people, look, if you want to make up your own rules, go find your own game. This is our game. This is our rules. This is what we're going to abide by. And if culturally you don't agree with that value, then you should be finding out why they don't agree. What you want to do is avoid something called ethnocentric thinking when you're dealing with different cultures. You don't want to apply your cultural values to someone in a way in which you create cultural superiority. The goal is to create cultural relativism, to understand the nature by which the individuals have come to that conclusion within their culture, and then create the common boundaries that you want to have. So I would assume that a global company, and I've worked with global companies, they have those core values that can be globally accepted. So for instance, one of them could be, hey, we don't do harm to people. The decisions we make in our business, we're not gonna make it. So whatever you want to call it, you want to call it integrity in the US, you want to call it something else in another country, it doesn't matter. The fact is that if you can agree to, hey, we're not going to cause harm to people, then we can gain alliance and agreements. For the areas where you have a big difference, a big disparity, find some things that you can agree on and start building your path from there, building the understanding from there. But I think it really has to do with you understanding how contextually, people come to things. I know I don't have enough time to answer this, but I just will say this real quickly. When I did a leadership session in De La Salle University in Manila, I asked the Asian students to raise their hand if they thought they were a leader. Nobody raised their hand. I found out later they didn't raise their hand because it wasn't culturally acceptable for them to accept a title of distinction without proving themselves. When I do this in the United Kingdom, in Canada, in the US, we have people raising their hands like crazy because we have a cultural difference in the way we will accept titles. We will accept them as a work in progress. We will accept them as, yes, we're still not there yet, but we'll work toward it. It's a difference in it. But if I would have assumed that the Asian students were wrong because they didn't raise their hand, I would have created cultural superiority.
Well, Troy, this has been fantastic. I really enjoyed this, and I am going to say so. I'm going to say this was fantastic on LinkedIn. So my closing comment and reminder to everyone is please like, comment, and share my post on LinkedIn later today about this event. Troy, I appreciate you bringing this content to the CFO Council. I personally have enjoyed the books of yours that I've read and your executive coaching. You're fantastic, and just thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it, everyone. And hey, reach out to me individually. I would love to answer some of your questions, and it'll be great to have some interaction. I'd love it. Thank you.
Thank you, and everyone have a wonderful day.